My name is Daniel Rook. I was a senior park ranger with the U.S. National Park Service, stationed out of Blackstone Canyon Preserve, Wyoming. I was 37 years old when I died. Word count, 1522. It happened fast, though I remember every frame of it. I'd been tracking a missing hiker along the North Rim Trail. Thin switchbacks carved into brittle shale, the kind that crumbles if you exhale too hard. A late-season storm had just rolled through, left the ground slick and the air humming with static. My radio was dead, my GPS flashing low battery. Just me, the wind, and a half-printed incident report folded in my breast pocket. I'd seen worse days. The canyon is a maze of false trails, echoing creeks, and drop-offs disguised by brush. We find lost folks all the time. But that morning something felt wrong before I even left the ranger station. The kind of pressure you get behind your eyes before lightning strikes. I brushed it off. Too many graveyard shifts, too much coffee. 2 miles in, I found the hikers' footprints veering off into a dry wash. They circled once, then stopped. No drag marks, no scuff of panic, just an abrupt end. I crouched, touched the sand. Still damp, still fresh. When I stood, the horizon tilted. I thought it was the vertigo you get from altitude, but it wasn't. The sound around me drained away. No wind, no birds, even my own breath seemed muted, like I was underwater. Then the shale under my boot gave out. There was no time to reach for the rope coiled at my hip. The edge collapsed like thin ice. I remember the sound, a deep, tearing exhale as the rock peeled from itself, and then nothing but the roar of empty space. People say your life flashes before your eyes. Mine didn't. I only saw the canyon folding upward, layers of red and black clay rotating like shutters closing. I must have hit the outcrop twice before I lost consciousness. The second impact was the one that killed me. I knew it because I heard my spine snap, clean and decisive, like a branch in winter. When I opened my eyes, I was standing. The pain was gone, but my body wasn't right. I looked down and saw my uniform intact, the same forest, green shirt and stitched patch, but everything had the texture of wet ash. My boots left no prints in the dirt. The canyon around me was silent and colorless, every surface dull to gray. I called out, "Dispatch, this is Ranger Rook." But my voice came back wrong, thin and delayed, like it traveled through a tunnel before returning to me. I pressed my radio. Static hissed, then words, faint and backward. I couldn't make them out. The air felt thick, almost oily. I started walking, following what I thought was the same trail down toward the creek bed. But the path kept stretching longer with each step. The walls of the canyon leaned inward until the sky narrowed to a slit of pale light. I reached for my compass. The needle spun slow and steady, not jittering but breathing. That's when I knew this wasn't shock. This was somewhere else. I saw movement ahead, a shape on the trail, crouched low. I thought maybe it was the missing hiker, but as I approached, it didn't turn. It was me, or what looked like me, same uniform, same hairline, even the same tear in the sleeve from a barbed fence last spring. He was kneeling, head bowed, my hands pressed into the dirt. I stopped a few feet away. "Hey," I said, "are you okay?" The figure lifted its head just enough for me to see the face. No eyes, just hollow sockets packed with black dust. Its mouth moved, but the words came out of my own throat. "You fell." I stumbled back. The duplicate, or whatever it was, crumbled inward, the way burned paper folds into itself. A gust carried the ashes away, and when they settled, the trail was gone. Only a slope leading down into a dark corridor remained. That corridor was the first descent. I didn't feel gravity pulling me down. It felt more like I was being drawn, the way water slides into a drain. The walls pulsed with dim light, veins glowing beneath stone. I could hear a rhythm breathing, hundreds of chests inhaling in unison. But there was no one there. The smell reminded me of rain on hot metal. At some point, I noticed my wristwatch ticking backward. The second hand jerked once every few beats, counting down. My footsteps echoed twice, one for me, one slightly delayed, as if a half-second version of myself walked behind me, copying every motion. I wanted to stop, but I couldn't. My body moved forward on its own accord. The corridor opened into a cavern shaped like a bell. At its center was a lake, not water but something darker, thicker. The surface quivered without sound. Along the shore stood objects I recognized: a ranger hat, a coiled rope, a clipboard with my handwriting, personal artifacts from my career, all arranged in a perfect circle. I knelt to inspect the clipboard. The paper listed every incident report I'd ever filed: rescues, fires, deaths. But under the last entry, written in my handwriting, was a new line: Daniel Rook, unrecovered. Something rippled across the lake. A shape human-sized, rising from the surface. Its face was half submerged, but I could see lips closer. The voice, when it reached me, sounded like all the people I'd ever failed to save, merged, overlapping, whispering the same thing: come take their place. I should have felt fear, but I didn't. Instead, there was recognition, a dull acceptance that this was the natural end of the search. My job had always been to go where others were lost. I took one step into the lake. It was cold only for a second, then scalding, like ice burning through skin. I went under. The sensation of drowning without lungs is hard to explain. I didn't need to breathe, but my body remembered panic. My limbs flailed in slow motion, and I realized the lake had no bottom, just suspension. I saw faint lights drifting below me, thousands of them, each a flicker of movement, faces, hands reaching upward. Some I recognized, others were strangers. They floated at varying depths, like sediment layers in a vertical graveyard. A current seized me, dragging me deeper until the light above shrank to a pinhole. The noise built gradually: whispers, then moans, then full voices chanting in a language that felt ancient but familiar. Each word thudded through my chest like a heartbeat. The water turned to air again, and I landed on solid ground, coughing though I no longer needed to breathe. This was the first level of hell. It looked like the canyon had inverted, stone arches hanging upside down, rivers running along the ceiling. The ground was flat but cracked open with narrow vents exhaling heat. I could see silhouettes moving within the fissures, people or things pacing back and forth, occasionally pressing their faces against the cracks. Their eyes glowed faint red, like the reflection of distant campfires. I started walking again. It wasn't choice anymore. Movement was built into the place, like gravity. Every step forward felt like fulfilling a rule I hadn't agreed to. The sound of my boots was the only proof of existence. I kept thinking, if this is hell, then it's structured, layered, procedural. The same way a park is mapped. Boundaries, zones, regions. Maybe the 7 levels follow that pattern. A figure appeared ahead, sitting beside a vent. At first I thought it was another reflection of me, but as I got closer, I saw it wore a ranger's badge from decades ago, the design retired long before my time. The man's face was aged beyond measure, features carved by heat and smoke. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "You're the new one," he said. His voice rasped like stones grinding. "They send us in shifts." "Who sends?" I asked. He smiled without humor. "The job never ends. You go where they're lost." I wanted to ask if he meant the hikers, the victims, the damned, but the ground shook, interrupting us. From the vents came screams, rising like steam. The old ranger stood, nodding toward a distant ridge glowing with dull red light. "That's where you start," he said. "You'll know the next level when you hear the call." He walked into a fissure and vanished, leaving behind the faint smell of pine sap and smoke. I turned toward the ridge. The light pulsed, timed with my heartbeat. The path between us stretched wider, yet I was already walking. I could feel something behind me, hands brushing my back, the air trembling as if filled with invisible wings. I didn't look. Not because I was brave, but because I knew it wouldn't matter. When I reached the ridge's edge, I saw what lay beyond a valley of mirrors, each one tall as a tree, reflecting not my image but moments of my life out of order. The boy I pulled from a flash flood. The woman we found frozen near Elk Pass. The avalanche victims whose names I'd written and then forgotten. They were all there, trapped inside their moments, repeating endlessly. Their mouths moved, but instead of screams, I heard the word, down. So I went down. The ridge cracked open beneath me, the mirrors shattering in silence, and the valley collapsed into another dark spiral. The wind that pulled me inward carried faint voices counting. 7. Always 7. I didn't know if that was how many levels remained, or how many times I'd fallen before. And as the world folded over itself again, I thought maybe hell isn't punishment. Maybe it's the search that never ends. The fall stretched into forever, but when I finally hit ground, it wasn't impact, it was surrender. The earth below gave like wet clay, swallowing me waist deep before spitting me onto a flat plain the color of dried blood. Heat shimmered across the horizon. The air smelled of copper and singed hair, and when I wiped the dust from my face, my fingers came away red. The first level's cavern had vanished. Above me hung a sky that pulsed instead of shone, veins of dim light running through a sheet of black. It wasn't night, it was the underside of something alive. Wind slid sideways, dragging grit that rasped against my teeth. Every breath tasted burnt. I stood, shaking off the last of the fall. The ground stretched smooth in every direction, no ridge, no canyon wall. Far away, the surface wavered with movement, figures walking in slow circles. Between us rose spires of glass, thin and curved like ribs. They caught the glow from the sky and fractured it into crimson shards that scattered over the plain. I started toward them. The air pressed back with every step, heavier near the glass. The first spire I reached was hollow, humming faintly at my touch. Inside it, shadows swam like trapped smoke. When I leaned close, I realized they were people, faces pressed against the inner surface, mouths open in silent screams. Heat radiated through the glass. I jerked my hand away. The hum deepened and a low vibration rippled through the ground. A voice slid up behind me. "You shouldn't touch them. They remember." I turned. A man in ranger khaki stood a few paces off, skin blistered from sun that didn't exist. His eyes were filmed white. The badge on his chest was melted into his shirt. "Second level," he said. "We call it the glass field. Everything that burns here is memory." He walked past me, running a cracked hand over another spire. "They don't cool," he said. "They record." Before I could ask, the air shook, a rolling thunder that wasn't thunder at all, but 1,000 screams caught in the glass, resonating together. The light pulsed with each wave of sound. The ranger raised his arms as if in worship, then collapsed to his knees. His body stiffened, skin graying, and I watched in horror as he slid forward and merged with the base of the spire, his outline sinking into it like ink into paper. His face reappeared on the inner wall, one more reflection. The noise faded. Silence settled, thicker than air. I stepped back, heart pounding though it didn't need to. Around me, hundreds of these towers dotted the plain, each filled with dim shapes of people caught mid-motion. Between them, black fissures opened and closed, breathing. I walked on, weaving between the glass pillars. After a while, distance stopped making sense. No matter how far I went, the spires stayed the same size, the horizon fixed. My boots left faint prints that filled instantly with ash. Once, I thought I saw water glimmering ahead, but it was only heat bending the light. The sound of my steps began to echo, though the air was dead still. Then I realized it was an echo. It was another set of footsteps matching mine exactly, half a second behind. I turned, nothing. Just dust swirling into my own shape for a heartbeat before vanishing. A black storm gathered low across the plain, not clouds but swarms. Sheets of ash whipped into spirals. When the first gust hit, it didn't sting, it cut. Fine particles sliced shallow lines across my arms. I raised them to cover my face and kept moving, drawn toward a darker shape ahead, a trench or canyon torn straight through the field. The trench yawned wide enough to swallow the plain's glow. From within came light, steady and white, almost gentle. I dropped to my knees at the edge and looked down. The bottom seethed with molten glass. Rivers of it flowed through channels, each one filled with shapes writhing just below the surface. They moved in rhythm, as if the molten current commanded them to dance. The heat should have scorched me, but the pain stayed distant, a reminder without sensation. A bridge spanned the trench, narrow, made of fused bones slick with condensation. It trembled under no wind. Across it, I could see the continuation of the plain and something beyond a line of structures that might have been buildings once, now half melted into the horizon. I stepped onto the bridge. It bowed beneath my weight but held. The hum returned, louder with each footfall, deep enough to shake my ribs halfway across. Movement rippled in the molten river below. Faces rose, screaming silently. The sound hit a second later, pure vibration that blurred my vision. I dropped to one knee. The bone bridge groaned like a living thing. A hand burst from the glass beneath, grasping at the air just below me. Another followed. They clawed upward, nails melting as they reached. When one hand brushed the bridge, it left a smear of glowing residue that hissed like acid. I scrambled forward, the surface bending under my boots. The last few steps felt endless. When I finally jumped off the far side, the bridge snapped behind me, sinking into the river in slow motion, dissolving without a sound. The ground here was different, darker, firmer, patterned like cooling lava. The air carried a metallic tang mixed with rain that would never fall. The ruined buildings ahead loomed clearer now, hollow shells of stone and metal, some leaning, some half buried. Their windows glowed from inside, pulsing with that same heart, like rhythm as the sky. I approached the first one. Inside were rows of desks, typewriters made of black iron, each still clacking though no one sat before them. Papers spilled across the floor, curling in the heat. I picked one up. It was blank on one side, but on the other, lines appeared as I held it. Ansidi rapar sel velos subisida ro arched. The next line filled itself in slowly, letter by letter, status pending. The typewriters stopped together. Every key turned toward me like eyes. One slammed a sheet into place and began typing again. I watched, unable to move. The words spelled out disket. A door at the back of the room swung open. Beyond it, a staircase wound downward through flickering light. I felt the heat breathing from below, the promise of something deeper. The air whispered through the doorway. Soft, almost kind. I turned back once. The field outside glimmered through the window, spires stretching forever, each holding a face twisted upward in mute appeal. The sky above them throbbed once, like a slow heartbeat, and I thought I heard faint laughter inside the pulse. Then I stepped through the door. The staircase was carved from salt that wept. Droplets ran down the walls, glowing as they fell. Each one hissed when it hit the steps, releasing a brief whisper, words too fast to catch. The deeper I went, the cooler the air became. Shadows thickened, congealing into shapes that leaned close but never touched me. At the final landing, I stopped. Ahead waited another passage, breathing mist that smelled of wet stone and river moss. The light there pulsed faint blue, an impossible color after all the red. It looked almost peaceful, almost human. I realized this was what the old ranger meant. Each level a different geography, a new law of physics, a new kind of trap. Behind me, the stair sealed shut, salt hardening into a wall. The whispering stopped. Only my own heartbeat, still echoing though my chest didn't rise, kept rhythm. I stepped forward into the mist. The ground softened again, turning from salt to silt. Somewhere ahead, water murmured, low and steady. The air cooled to the point where I could see my breath, white in the dark. After all that fire, the chill felt merciful. I moved toward the sound. I saw a river flowing upward through a corridor of rock. The same current I'd fallen through, now reversed, luminous veins in the stone. Its glow painted everything in silver light. Across the water stood a figure holding a lantern. I couldn't make out its face, only its outline, but I knew it was waiting. The river widened between us, singing a low note that trembled through my bones. The figure lifted the lantern higher, and the flame bent toward me, pulled by some invisible tide. The current changed direction, swirling around my feet. I understood then this was the path deeper in, not across but down. I closed my eyes and stepped into the water. The surface closed above my head with the quiet finality of a door. The water didn't drown me. It swallowed sound instead. Every heartbeat, every thought, muted until all that remained was a slow pulse that seemed to come from the current itself. I drifted downward through the glowing river, light streaming past like veins under skin. When the pull eased, my boots brushed stone again. The glow dimmed into haze. I stood in a cavern so vast the ceiling was lost to mist. The air here was heavy but not hot. It pressed softly, like fog thick with breath. My uniform was dry again, though I'd come through water. Ahead stretched a forest of pillars, not trees, but columns of ash twisted into shapes that mimicked them. Between them, dim blue motes floated, pulsing gently as if exhaled from the ground. Each step stirred echoes, The stone wasn't solid, it flexed slightly underfoot, and the faint sensation of movement rippled outward, as though something beneath the surface responded. When I touched one of the ash trunks, it crumbled to powder, revealing a bone core that vibrated with faint hum. Somewhere deep in that forest, I heard voices, low even, repeating the same few words: report in, report in. The sound wasn't pleading or cruel, it was tired. I followed it because direction didn't exist here, only pull. The deeper I went, the brighter the motes became, until I could see shapes drifting inside them. Faces blurred like photographs exposed too long. Each time one passed close, the air cooled. They whispered fragments. North Ridge. Still searching. No response. I recognized the cadence. Every one of them was a ranger call, cut short before an answer. A faint crack snapped behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just the ash swaying as if breathed upon. But when I looked back, the path I'd walked had rearranged itself. The pillars closed ranks, sealing the way. The forest changed shape when unseen. I moved faster, guided by the voices ahead. The ground sloped gently down to a clearing lit from below. There, in a hollow, stood a watchtower identical to the one in Blackstone Canyon, my post. Every board, every nail exactly as I remembered. Even the faded warning placard still clung to the railing. It shouldn't have been possible. Yet the smell of cedar and warped plywood was real. The radio antenna leaned the same way I'd left it after the storm last spring. I approached in a daze, half expecting the familiar creak of the steps under my boots. When it came, it felt like home and betrayal at once. Inside, everything waited. My desk, my chair, the old thermos still half full beside a stack of incident forms. But the papers were blank until I touched them. Words bloomed across the top page: Alai Tidi Forastiof Rafletio Raquardio should hiss to life. Static, then my own voice. Rourke. Status. I froze. The voice continued. Same cadence, same tone. Rourke, do you copy? Respond. I forced out. I'm here. Describe your surroundings, it said. I looked out through the window. The forest swayed in a wind that didn't reach the tower. The blue motes rose and fell like fireflies, forming spirals that drifted skyward and vanished into the mist ceiling. There's trees made of ash, lights. It feels alive, static. Then keep recording. A map unrolled itself across the desk. The ink lines shifted like worms under skin, rearranging into new patterns. Tiny marks blinked into existence, each one labeled with a date and a name. Some I knew, some were mine. Every few seconds another dot appeared closer to the center, until one settled directly beneath the symbol for my station. That's when the knocking started. 3 steady taps on the door, pause. Then again, I turned slowly. Through the narrow window, a shadow waited, a silhouette in ranger gear, hat brim low. The handle turned once, stopped. Then came the voice. You left me up there. I stepped back. Ooh, the door rattled. The man in the ravine. The rope slipped. I remembered him. The climber I'd nearly reached before the ledge collapsed years ago. His name was Morgan. The body was never recovered. That wasn't my fault, I said out loud. The door answered by breathing. The gap around the frame pulsed as if the tower itself inhaled. Wood groaned under strain. I could see movement outside. More figures emerging from the trees, each one wearing a ranger uniform, each face hidden. Their boots made no sound on the soil. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch. I need static. Then laughter, quiet, almost fond. There's no dispatch, Rourke. Only return. The tower shuddered. The desk split down the middle. Light spilled up through the floorboards, bright enough to blind. The forms caught fire without smoke. I stumbled back as the window shattered inward, shards floating instead of falling. Outside, the ash trees bent toward the tower, roots tearing from the ground, reaching. A single phrase pulsed through the radio again, slower this time. Report in. Report in. The light beneath my feet solidified into symbols. Circles within circles, burning lines of script I couldn't read. The tower was sinking. No, the ground was rising to swallow it. Through the window, I saw the forest folding, every tree leaning inward, closing over us like fingers. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing outside again, but the tower was gone. In its place rose a crater filled with still water. My reflection looked up from it, delayed by a breath. Behind my reflection, something moved. A black shape, enormous, wings folded against its sides. I spun around. Nothing. When I looked back, the reflection had vanished, but the water was rippling outward as if something below had just dived deeper. A low wind began, the first real wind since I'd arrived. It carried faint voices, not words this time but sighs, like exhaustion turned into sound. The ash trees bent with it, their surfaces flaking away to reveal glowing veins underneath. Each pulse matched my heartbeat until the rhythm became one. I realized then what this level was. The first was recognition, the second, endurance, the third, remembrance. Every echo of the job, every name written in reports, replaying itself until identity wore thin. The geography wasn't punishment, it was archive. The ground vibrated under my feet. Cracks opened between the glowing roots, spilling blue light so bright it turned the world white. From deep below came a rumble that wasn't thunder but a breath drawn by something vast. The sound filled the cavern, pressing on my chest. Then, a whisper, huge and soft down. The crater water erupted upward, drenching the air in cold mist. The ash trees shattered. The floor of the cavern tilted, folding like paper toward a single dark seam running through the center. I tried to back away, but the pull was already on me. The light dimmed to gray and I felt weight return. True gravity tugging me toward the next threshold. I looked once more into the collapsing forest. The motes rose like sparks, ascending faster than the rest of the world fell. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw them arrange into words across the air. You're almost halfway. Then they scattered, and I was falling again, this time through pure shadow. The last thing I heard before the dark took shape was my own voice on the radio, calm and steady as ever. Copy that. Proceeding to level 4. The dark had texture. It wasn't absence but fabric. Thick, wet, stretching over me as I fell. I clawed it out of instinct, and it clung back, strands of black silk winding around my wrists before dissolving. When gravity let go, I found myself suspended in air that shivered faintly, humming with heat. A horizon appeared like a line drawn by a blade. Above it, nothing. Below it, a world glowing deep orange, lit by rivers of molten metal winding through canyons of rust. The air swirled with floating ash that sparkled as it fell, catching the red light like dying stars. I stepped forward, and the ground flexed beneath my boots. Thin plates of iron over hollow space. Every exhale echoed. The sound bounced back sharper, as though someone else breathed with me. The heat didn't burn, it watched. I moved along a ridge where metallic sand slid in slow waves. Beyond, the landscape opened into a basin filled with structures, massive furnaces shaped like towers, flames licking out of their mouths. Chains the size of trees hung from the unseen ceiling, swaying slowly. Each one carried cages, some still moving, some burned to silhouettes. When the wind shifted, I heard metal creak like voices trying to speak through steel. A memory surfaced. Training drills on wildfire containment lines, the hum of heat through gear, the smell of scorched pine. This place smelled the same. The echo of life disguised as familiarity. At the basin's edge, an iron walkway extended across the void. Halfway along it stood a figure hunched over a lever. The figure wore a helmet welded shut, smoke leaking from the seams. Sparks flared whenever it moved. When I approached, it turned with mechanical slowness. "You took your time," it said. The voice came from inside the helmet, tinny and dry. "They're backed up." I glanced past him. The walkway led to a chute where molten metal poured like a waterfall into darkness. The surface glowed with motion, silhouettes rising from below, reaching toward the spout, melting back as the stream hit them. "What is this place?" I asked. The helmeted man wiped ash from his gloves. "4th level, the foundry. Everything that can't forget is reforged here." He pulled the lever. The flow of metal brightened and the screams rose to match. He spoke over them. "Calm, they keep coming. We pour them through until they hold shape." "What shape?" "Whatever you remember most." He gestured to the ground around us. I hadn't noticed the scattered fragments, melted name tags, badges, half-formed faces pressed into slag. The smell of ozone and sweat blurred together. I stepped closer to the edge. The heat rippled in waves. Shapes moved inside the molten river. not entirely human. Some tried to climb, their skin hardening into armor before cracking again. Others just floated, eyes open, mouths moving soundlessly. For a second, I saw my own reflection among them, mouth opening wider, matching the rhythm of the fall that had brought me here. The man rested both hands on the lever. "It's never enough," he said. "They think they'll be purified. They forget the metal never cools." He turned toward me. Through the visor slits, faint blue light pulsed. "You were a ranger," he said. "That means you keep things contained. Try again." He shoved the lever all the way forward. A shockwave hit. The metal surge doubled, the entire foundry roared. The platform shook and cracks spread under my boots. The cages overhead rattled violently, sparks raining down in sheets. One chain snapped, sending its load crashing into the molten pool below. Steam erupted in a blinding flash. When the air cleared, the man was gone, only the helmet left on the walkway, still smoking. The lever reset itself slowly, like a lung exhaling. Below, the river changed color, from orange to white, then to the color of bone. The shapes within it began to crawl toward the surface, dozens at once, hands scraping, faces blank. They climbed onto the iron shore, dripping molten residue that hardened into shells. Each took a step and froze, bodies locking mid-motion like statues. In moments, the entire bank was lined with figures, scorched rangers, climbers, hikers. Everyone I'd ever searched for, all staring at me. They opened their mouths together, no sound, just heat pushing against my chest. I staggered backward. The walkway cracked, dropping a segment into the river. The figures remained motionless except their eyes. They followed me, tracking even as the ground buckled. I ran. The walkway twisted into a spiral ramp leading upward along the inside wall of the foundry. Firelight flickered through holes in the metal, revealing corridors that led nowhere. Every few steps, a siren wailed from within the walls, short bursts like the signal for evacuation. My instincts kicked in: climb higher, find cooler air. But the spiral didn't ascend, it looped. Each turn brought me back to the same section, the same glowing river below. The statues had multiplied, crowding the banks, faces merging into one mass of watching. A faint metallic chime rang from the helmet I'd left behind. I looked down. It was rolling along the walkway toward the river, bumping over seams, until it reached the edge and stopped. From within came a single whisper, "Down." The platform gave way. I fell through flame this time, not light. The heat flayed thought from motion. The river swallowed me whole and replaced everything with white sound. When I came to, I lay on a bed of cooled metal, its surface rough with shapes half-formed. My hand sank slightly. Underneath was warmth, pulsing. I pushed myself up and saw a tunnel ahead, faintly glowing. The air was thick with iron dust. The tunnel's walls were studded with embedded faces, each one mouthing silent words as I passed. Some I recognized, others were strangers, but all watched me. Their eyes tracked my steps, and with each glance I felt Waylek behind my ribs, a heaviness that wasn't guilt but gravity. The descent had reversed, this was pulling inward now. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, lit by hanging crucibles suspended on chains. Inside each, a single flame burned without fuel. Beneath them, black pools reflected the light like oil. Between the pools stood benches and tools arranged like a workshop. It felt absurdly mundane, a craftsman's space in the middle of damnation. Something moved near the far wall, a woman, back turned, hammering at a slab of glowing metal. Sparks rose in slow motion. She didn't look up when I approached. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who stopped asking that," she said. Her hammer struck again, ringing clear. The slab shifted through its surface. I saw movement, my own face forming, faint and molten. She dipped her hand into the metal, molding the features like clay. "Everything melts eventually," she said. "Even names. Why show me this?" She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving trails of light that faded into soot. "Because you're next." She gestured toward an empty slab beside hers. The tools beside it were already warm, the imprint of my palms visible on the handles though I hadn't touched them. The crucibles overhead swayed gently, dripping fire like rain. Each drop hissed when it hit the floor, forming small, perfect holes that smoked. I backed away. The woman sighed, the kind of sigh that sounds centuries old. "You keep moving as if down leads out," she said. "It doesn't. It leads closer." "To what?" "The center," she said simply. "Where everything's remembered." Behind me, the ground trembled. The molten pools rippled outward, merging into one. From their depths, the white light returned, rising like fog. The hammer dropped from her hand and sank soundlessly. The air thinned, drawing inward toward the center of the room. I felt it tug at me, gentle at first, then relentless. She smiled sadly. "Level 5 wants you." The floor gave way. The foundry and its fire folded upward like metal cooling too fast. I was pulled through the light, through heat that no longer burned. My last sight of the 4th level was the woman turning back to her work, her own face already melting into the glowing slab. The fall was quieter this time. Below me stretched darkness shot through with faint green threads, moving like current. The air grew colder, heavier with salt. A low rumble came from below, not thunder, not machinery, but surf breaking on unseen shores. I realized the temperature of hell was dropping. The light dimmed to a deep, green-black haze, and the air grew damp. The first real moisture I'd felt since dying. My boots struck something that gave underfoot with a wet crunch. Not soil. Bone fragments, slick with algae. The ground stretched flat toward a coastline that shouldn't exist, where waves rolled without sound. The water shone faintly from within, every swell revealing shapes that drifted just below the surface, people walking, eyes open, mouths oving in silence. Mist crept in from the sea, carrying the smell of salt and rusted iron. The horizon pulsed with weak flashes of light, like lightning muffled behind glass. I began walking toward the shore, though there was no reason to. Movement had become its own command. The ocean receded as I neared it. The tide pulled back dozens of feet at a time, exposing slick stones etched with writing, not letters, lines of coordinates all in the same tight script. I knelt to trace 14326 and N 100°46 a location in Wyoming. The coordinates shifted as I watched, rearranging into new numbers, cycling through places I'd patrolled, bodies I'd recovered. Every disappearance cataloged here, breathing beneath the tide. The ground shuddered, and I looked up to see figures emerging from the mist. Dozens of them, each carrying lanterns that burned pale green. They walked in single file toward the water, stepping over the bones with reverent precision. Their faces were veiled with thin gauze that fluttered in the damp wind. I called out, but the only reply was the hiss of surf. When they reached the edge, they stopped, turned to face inland, and waited. A bell tolled from beneath the sea. The sound came slow, heavy, older than language. It vibrated through my ribs, through the ground, through the bones beneath it. The lanterns flickered once, then steadied. The veiled figures began to sing, a low, tuneless hum that matched the rhythm of the waves. The water started to boil. Something immense rose from below, a hull made of dark wood, rotted and glistening with kelp. It wasn't a ship, not entirely. It had no mast, no sail, just the shape of one. Formed by the bodies of those submerged, hands gripped the edges, pulling it upward. When it settled, the lantern bearers stepped forward and climbed aboard one by one. No one spoke, no one steered. I didn't move, but the tide advanced anyway, curling around my boots. The bell tolled again, and the sea whispered my name, drawn out like wind through a canyon. The ship turned toward me. Every lantern flared brighter, green light cutting through fog, painting my reflection across the wet sand. I could see myself there, standing ankle deep, watching something inevitable arrive. The first lantern bearer reached out a hand. I should have refused. Instead, I stepped forward. The water rose to my knees, then my chest. It was cold, and that was enough to make it real again. I grabbed the hand. The veil slipped as I climbed, revealing not a face but a blank mask carved from stone. The eyes glowed faintly from within. The deck groaned under my weight. The lanterns swayed, their light sweeping over carvings etched into the planks. More coordinates, more names. The bell sounded once more, and the ship began to drift. Not out to sea, but downward. The horizon folded above us as the ocean swallowed everything. For a moment there was peace. The water outside glowed softly, plankton swirling like constellations. Then shapes began to move among them. Massive silhouettes, long, limbed, and slow, circling the descent. One brushed the hull. The impact reverberated through my bones. Another followed, scraping against the side. The lanterns flickered wildly, and cracks raced across the planks. The ship tilted. Water burst through the seams, black and freezing. The veiled figures didn't react. They stood still, humming as the deck filled. I tried to climb higher, but the mast, or what passed for it, was gone. The current seized me and tore me over the rail. I sank into the glow. The sea wasn't deep. It was endless in another direction. The current pulled sideways, dragging me through suspended corridors of silt and bones. Around me, structures rose from the murk, arches of coral and stone inscribed with endless lists of numbers. Each arch pulsed as I passed, lighting briefly, then dimming, like heartbeats. The deeper I went, the louder the bell became, though I couldn't tell if it was ahead or inside my skull. Eventually, the current eased. I landed on smooth sand and stood. The water cleared enough to show the outline of a submerged city. Buildings leaned and crumbled, streets paved with bone dust. The glow came from the cracks in the stone, veins of green fire that pulsed in rhythm with the tide. At the city's center, a tower rose crookedly, its peak broken off. From its windows spilled faint light. I started toward it. As I walked, the ground shifted underfoot, flexing like muscle. Hands reached up through the sand, hundreds of them, grasping, releasing, never quite touching. They whispered as I passed names, locations, coordinates again, a litany of the lost. The tower door was ajar. Inside, stairs spiraled downward into dark water. I descended, each step dissolving behind me. The air turned thick with salt. The deeper I went, the warmer the light became, fading from green to amber. The final landing opened into a chamber the size of a cathedral. The water here hung suspended in midair, defying gravity, rippling gently around me. At its center floated a single stone tablet carved with words I didn't want to read but couldn't avoid. Levl fvtshi dedudndr shefi. Ivar nam karai distel kalispa. The surface of the tablet rippled, and water poured from the letters like tears. Behind me, the voices rose again. Those of every missing person I'd searched for, layered until they became a single plea. Finish the list. The chamber walls lit with lines of text. Thousands of entries stretching from floor to ceiling, all incomplete. My own handwriting filled them in one by one. The final space at the bottom remained blank. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. Before I could touch the stone, the sea around me convulsed. A wave slammed through the chamber, dragging me off my feet. The current tore me upward through the flooded stairwell. I hit the ceiling of water and burst through it, landing on another shore, the same shore but drained of light. The sky above was a flat slate gray. The sea had receded completely, leaving only cracked mud and scattered bones. The ship lay broken a mile out, lanterns extinguished. The bell tolled one last time, dull and distant. I stood shaking, staring into the horizon that no longer glowed. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. Then, behind me, something massive inhaled. The ground vibrated. The bones under the mud began to shift, drawing together into shapes. Spines aligned, ribs knitted. A skeleton rose from the coastline, hundreds of feet tall, stitched together from everything that had drowned here. Its skull was missing. In its place burned a hollow sphere of light. The air bent around it, distorting the world. It stepped forward. Each movement sounded like thunder under a blanket. Its chest opened with a sound like tearing canvas, revealing a cavern of ribs filled with pulsing light. Inside, I saw hundreds of figures walking in circles, rangers, hikers, children, all glowing faintly, endlessly repeating their last moments. I understood then. The drowned city wasn't hell's bottom. It was its heart's shore, where everything lost was gathered before being remembered. This creature, the thing made of bones, was the archive given form. It reached out, hand descending slow as tide. The air compressed until my ears rang. When its fingers touched the ground before me, the pressure stopped. The light inside its chest flared, and I saw my own shape among the circling figures. Still walking, still searching. The creature spoke, though its jaw never moved. Its voice was the ocean itself, breaking through stone down. The mud beneath me split. The world folded like paper again, pulling me through cracks of light and salt. The last thing I saw was the creature kneeling, lowering its head toward the empty sea as if praying. Then everything went black, and the sound of water became wind. Wind poured through the dark like breath through a flute. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on something soft that pulsed faintly beneath me. Not ground, flesh. The surface rippled with each inhale, stretching into a horizon of muscle and sinew that rose and fell like the swell of a sleeping giant. The air stank of copper and ozone. Every heartbeat underfoot was steady, too slow to be human. I stood carefully. The world around me wasn't lit by sun or fire, but by veins that glowed faint red, running through the landscape in tangled arteries. Far away, mountains of bone shifted with each pulse. They weren't mountains, they were vertebrae, stacked to the sky. Somewhere between them, a constant low rumble echoed, like a growl dragged through miles of distance. The descent had carried me inside something alive. A thin rain began to fall, thick as oil. The drops hissed when they hit the surface, releasing steam that smelled faintly sweet, almost floral. I tasted one by instinct. It burned my tongue to numbness. Every droplet that struck the ground left behind a faint mark. A small, dark eye that blinked once before closing. I walked. The landscape flexed beneath my boots, yielding slightly with each step. Every so often, the ground trembled as if shifting in discomfort. I wondered if this level had a name, but none announced itself. The last one had been the drowned archive. This felt deeper, more personal. The place between organs where memory hides. Ahead, the red glow gathered into a single beam shooting upward from a mound the size of a hill. As I drew closer, I saw it wasn't a hill at all, but a colossal heart, half buried, beating with sluggish determination. Each pulse sent ripples through the air, distorting sight and sound. On its surface lay thousands of small objects, keys, coins, rings, fragments of uniforms, embedded in tissue like offerings. I saw badges there too. Park insignias melted slightly by heat. I reached out. The moment my hand brushed the surface, pain split my skull. Voices poured in all at once, snatches of radio chatter, screams cut short, laughter that ended too soon. The heart thudded harder, responding. Blood, thick and luminous, welled from the contact point and ran down my arm in slow motion, glowing brighter the farther it fell. When it hit the ground, the earth convulsed. The heart split down the middle, opening like a wound. Inside was a spiral staircase descending into darkness, each step carved from ribs that still pulsed faintly. I hesitated, then began to climb down. The air grew colder with every turn. The pulse overhead faded until only the faint vibration in the bones remained. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a vast cavern lined with mirrors, not glass, but polished flesh. My reflection in each was different. In one I was younger, in another older, gaunt, eyes hollowed. In all of them, I was still a ranger, still wearing the patch. They spoke without moving their mouths. 6th level, they whispered. The hollow organ. Where every voice you've answered comes home. I turned away, but the reflections followed, shifting their positions without sound. Each mirrored Daniel moved a half-second slower, delayed like a broken feed. When I stopped, they caught up. One reached through the surface, hand solid, fingers slick and cold. I staggered back. The hand groped the air, grabbed my sleeve, and pulled. The membrane gave way. I fell forward into my own reflection. For a moment I saw nothing but veins of light rushing past. Then I was standing in a hallway lined with doors. Hundreds of them, stretching into infinity, each marked with a date and time. The air here was thin and electric, buzzing faintly. I opened the nearest door. Behind it was a scene frozen mid-breath, a mountainside in winter, a search team halfway through digging out an avalanche zone. I saw myself kneeling beside a buried climber, his face pale, mouth open. I remembered this rescue. The man had survived, yet as I watched, the moment replayed with small differences. The rope snapped early, the snow collapsed wrong, the man's eyes opened too soon, his mouth moved. And though there was no sound, I could read the word why. I slammed the door shut. The next one opened itself. A forest fire, orange sky, smoke curling through pine trunks. My team running. Then the explosion of wind as the fire jumped line. I felt heat on my face that shouldn't have existed. When the smoke cleared, everyone was gone except me. The word burned into the ash beneath my boots again. Door after door burst open on its own. Every one showed a variation of failure, each more intimate than the last. The corridors filled with overlapping images, shattered radios, abandoned camps, faces turning away. The buzz in the air grew into a single sustained note that shook the walls. Then came the whispers again, this time closer. You couldn't save them. You wouldn't stop looking. You keep coming back. I pressed my palms over my ears, but the sound was internal. It vibrated through my teeth, through the roots of thought itself. The hallway began to twist, doors folding inward like the throat of some enormous creature swallowing me whole. At the end of the corridor stood a single door unlike the rest. Plain, wooden, no markings. I reached for the handle. The moment I touched it, every other door vanished. Silence returned, complete and awful. I opened it. The room beyond was small and empty except for a table. On it lay a radio identical to mine, its display flashing weakly. I lifted the receiver. Static. Then a voice, faint, distorted, unmistakably human. "Rourke, you're almost through." "Through what?" I asked. "Listen." The static shifted into rhythm, a heartbeat. My heartbeat. Each pulse louder than the last. The room shook. Cracks spread across the walls, glowing red from within. The voice continued softly. "The last level waits beneath the pulse. Every call ends there." The radio melted in my hands. Liquid metal dripped between my fingers and pooled on the floor, which began to tremble like skin. I stepped back as the floor split open, revealing another spiral. This one made not of bone or salt but pure light, twisting downward into endless brightness. The hum of the heartbeat filled everything. I looked once more around the shrinking room. The mirrors were gone. The reflections, the doors, the corridors, all swallowed by that rhythm. It wasn't threatening anymore, it was steady. Familiar, like a rescue beacon pinging through static. I took one step onto the spiral. The light felt solid, cool beneath my boots. It vibrated faintly with each pulse. Down below, the glow thickened until it became impossible to see where it ended. I started to descend. Each step samped slightly, as though the light were soft wax. With every turn, I passed through layers of sound, first the murmur of voices, then the crash of waves, then the hiss of fire, until all the previous levels, noises merged into one sustained chord. The further I went, the clearer it became that the chord wasn't external. It was mine, drawn from every breath, every radio transmission, every heartbeat since the canyon. The light began to dim, shifting from white to red to black again. When it settled, I stood at the edge of a massive chasm that stretched into infinity. Its sides were smooth, carved into perfect concentric rings. Each ring glowed faintly and moved, rotating like gears. Deep within, something enormous turned in slow rhythm with the heartbeat above. I leaned over the edge. The heat was gone. The air here was cold and perfectly still. For the first time since dying, I felt weightless. The pulse slowed until there was only silence between beats, and in that silence came a whisper that filled the space around me one more. The chasm floor cracked open, revealing a narrow shaft of light piercing upward, brighter than anything I'd seen. It reached me like an open hand. I didn't jump. I didn't fall. I just leaned and gravity did the rest. As I slipped into the beam, every sound, every image, every failure I'd carried fell away like dust from a uniform burned clean. The light folded over me, cool and silent. The last thought I had before the world inverted again was simple, and it wasn't fear. It was the question that had started everything. Who answers the final call? And the light answered, gently down. The light narrowed until it became a single line running through the dark. When my body stopped moving, I realized I wasn't standing on anything at all, just balanced on that thin strip of radiance, a bridge across nothing. The air hummed faintly, too quiet to call sound. It pressed behind my eyes like the weight of deep water. Ahead, the line extended forever, fading into white. Behind me was blackness without texture. I walked. Each step made the light shiver, spreading faint ripples that dissolved into the dark. There was no heat, no wind, no time here. Only that gentle vibration beneath my soles, steady as a heartbeat slowed to calm. My body no longer ached. The exhaustion that had soaked into me through 6 layers of descent had gone. It was replaced by something harder to name, awareness stripped clean of need. Far ahead, the light thickened, blooming outward into shape. At first I thought it was another plane, but the edges curved inward, folding on themselves until they formed a sphere of soft gold suspended above the line. The closer I came, the brighter it grew, until all shadow retreated. I raised a hand to block the glare and saw the light pass through my fingers. The sphere pulsed once, twice, then opened like an eye. Inside it was not fire nor stars, but faces. Thousands of them, layered in gentle motion, all illuminated from within. Every person I'd searched for. Everyone I'd failed to reach. Their expressions weren't pained or accusatory anymore. Just waiting. The glow around them flickered with breath. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard the rush of wind across canyons, the distant murmur of rivers, the living world above. The sphere spoke without sound. 7th level, the core, the memory that remembers itself. I stood on the line, unsure if it expected me to answer. My voice felt like a useless tool here. Still, I tried. What now? The air shimmered, and for the first time since dying, I saw my own reflection clearly. It stood beside me, identical calm. When it spoke, the voice came from inside my skull. Every ranger has a map, it said. You marked your boundaries in the world above, search zones, safe camps, lost coordinates. This is the map beneath those maps, the end of the trail. The reflection lifted a hand and pointed into the sphere. Inside, I saw myself as I'd been, alive, standing on the canyon rim, wind tugging at my jacket. I could almost smell the juniper, hear the crackle of radio static. The image rippled, and the other me turned, looking straight toward where I stood now. The reflection whispered, "Someone has to stay and remember where everyone went." I shook my head. "That's not my job anymore. It never stops being," it said gently. "Search and rescue. Down here, it's only the search." The sphere pulsed brighter. The faces within began to move faster, merging into one vast pattern, a spiral spinning slowly, each face fading into the next until none were distinct. Light flowed from it in slow waves, brushing against me like wind through grass. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't peace. It was memory continuing itself. The reflection stepped forward. "You can leave if you want," it said. "You've descended far enough. Most stop here, folded into the pattern. But there's another path."
Not up, not down.
Out. The light at the base of the sphere narrowed, extending like the beam of a searchlight, cutting through the dark in a straight line. It pointed nowhere I could name. I hesitated. If I walk it, what happens? The reflection smiled, a small, tired expression I recognized from too many rescue debriefings. "Then you become what you always were, the one who keeps the line open." Behind the reflection, the sphere began to fade. The hum underfoot deepened, and the line beneath me vibrated like a radio channel seeking signal. From the distance came a faint, rhythmic tone, 3 short bursts, one long, the universal call for help. The reflection's eyes lifted toward the sound. "They're still calling?" it said. "You hear them now because you've reached the center." The living call through the cracks. The missing answer from here. The line brightened until I could no longer see where it met the void. My reflection began to dissolve, flaking into motes of white that drifted upward. "Every name you wrote," it said, "every voice you logged echoes through this place. Someone has to guide them out." I took a step toward the beam. The hum rose to a low thunder. The sphere dimmed behind me, its light shrinking until it was only a faint star in the dark. The line ahead pulsed in rhythm with that old heartbeat, slower now, but steady. I thought of the canyon. The edge crumbling, the fall that started it all. It seemed small now, a surface fracture of something much deeper. I realized this was not the bottom of hell at all. Hell didn't have a bottom. It was a pattern. 7 chambers of memory spiraling inward to a single point where all lost things met and waited to be remembered. I walked. With each step, the darkness around me thinned. Through it, faint outlines began to appear. Trees, mountains, the faint silhouette of a sky just before dawn. The beam beneath my feet faded into the color of sand. The hum became the whisper of wind. My boots touched ground again. I stood once more at the canyon rim. The air was cold, stars hung sharp above. The scent of rain lingered, just as it had before the fall. My radio lay half buried in dust beside me. Its light blinked weakly. I lifted it, pressed the button. Dispatch, this is Ranger Rook. Copy, static. Then, faintly a voice, a copy that, Rook. We thought we lost you. I stared out across the canyon. Far below, darkness pooled like still water. My reflection shimmered faintly on its surface, nodding once before fading. I should have felt relief, but what came instead was understanding, quiet, heavy, complete. The world above and the world below were the same terrain, folded different ways. Each call for help echoed both directions. Every descent answered something rising. The radio hissed again. Rourke, report. Status. I pressed the button. Still searching. I said, still here. Wind moved across the canyon, carrying my words away. Somewhere in that vast hollow, a heartbeat pulsed once, then stilled. The stars flickered. For a moment, just one of them blinked back. Bright, rhythmic, like a beacon. And then even that light went quiet.